Welcome back to the Daily Crypto Deep Dive. Today's deep dive is on Bitcoin Cash, a project that many people have heard of. Far fewer truly understand, and almost everyone has an opinion on, often without knowing the full story. Bitcoin Cash still has a substantial market capitalization, it's still actively traded, and it still exists for a very specific reason. But to understand why it exists at all, we need to go back to one of the most important and divisive moments in Bitcoin's history. To start with the present, Bitcoin Cash remains a large-cap cryptocurrency. While it no longer sits at the very top of the market alongside Bitcoin and Ethereum, its market capitalization is still measured in the billions of dollars. That alone makes it relevant. Markets don't assign multi-billion-dollar valuations to assets that are completely abandoned. Bitcoin Cash still has liquidity, exchange support, merchant usage in certain regions, and an active development community. But its story is inseparable from Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin Cash exists because of a disagreement, not about money, not about greed, but about what Bitcoin was meant to be. To understand that disagreement, we first need to explain a concept that comes up a lot in crypto, but is rarely explained clearly: a hard fork. A hard fork is essentially a permanent split in a blockchain. It happens when part of the community decides to change the rules of the network in a way that is not backward compatible. Once that change goes live, nodes that follow the new rules and nodes that follow the old rules can no longer agree on what the true version of the blockchain is. From that point on, two separate blockchains exist, each with its own history up to the moment of the split, and each with its own future. Think of it like a road that forks in two directions. Up until the fork, everyone was driving on the same road. At the fork, some drivers go left, others go right. From that point on, they are no longer traveling together, even though they share the same starting point. That's exactly what happened with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. In the early years of Bitcoin, one of the biggest technical debates was about block size. Each Bitcoin block has a size limit, which determines how many transactions can be included in each block. For a long time, that limit was 1 megabyte. When Bitcoin was small, this wasn't an issue. But as usage grew, blocks began to fill up, transaction fees increased, and confirmation times slowed. This sparked a fundamental disagreement. One group believed that Bitcoin should scale on-chain by increasing the block size. Bigger blocks would mean more transactions per block, lower fees, and faster confirmations. To them, Bitcoin was meant to be electronic cash, something people could use for everyday payments, just like the original Bitcoin white paper described. Another group believed that increasing the block size would make the network harder to run and more centralized. Larger blocks require more storage, more bandwidth, and more computing power. Their view was that Bitcoin should prioritize decentralization and security, even if that meant slower and more expensive transactions. They argued that scaling should happen off-chain, through solutions built on top of Bitcoin, rather than by changing its core rules. For years, this debate dragged on. It wasn't just technical, it became political, philosophical, and deeply personal within the community. Developers, miners, businesses, and users all had different incentives and different visions for Bitcoin's future. Eventually, the disagreement became irreconcilable. In August 2017, the network split. One version continued on with the original rules and later adopted scaling solutions like segregated witness and second-layer technologies. That chain kept the name Bitcoin. The other version increased the block size and became Bitcoin Cash. From that moment, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin were two separate assets, with two separate blockchains, two separate communities, and two different philosophies. Bitcoin Cash increased the block size significantly, allowing many more transactions per block. The goal was simple: keep fees low and make on-chain payments fast and cheap. In practice, Bitcoin Cash can process far more transactions per second than Bitcoin at the base layer, and transaction fees are typically much lower. Supporters of Bitcoin Cash argue that this keeps Bitcoin's original vision alive. They point to the white paper's title, "A peer-to-peer electronic cash system," and say that Bitcoin Cash stays closer to that idea than modern Bitcoin does. Critics argue that Bitcoin Cash sacrificed decentralization and security for convenience, and that its larger blocks make it easier for the network to become dominated by larger players with more resources. They also point out that scaling solutions on Bitcoin have improved over time, reducing the need for large on-chain blocks. What's important here is not to pick a side, but to understand that Bitcoin Cash was not created as a joke, a scam, or a random fork. It was created as a direct result of a genuine disagreement about how Bitcoin should scale and what it should prioritize. That disagreement never really went away. Over time, Bitcoin became increasingly positioned as digital gold, a store of value rather than a day-to-day payment system. Bitcoin Cash, meanwhile, continued to push the idea of fast, cheap payments. This divergence shaped everything that followed, including adoption, development focus, and market perception. Bitcoin Cash experienced its own volatility after the split. At times, its price surged dramatically as traders speculated on whether it could overtake Bitcoin or capture significant payment adoption. At other times, it fell sharply as enthusiasm faded and competition increased. The project also experienced internal divisions. Bitcoin Cash itself later split again, producing further forks and reinforcing the idea that governance and consensus are difficult challenges in decentralized systems. Each split diluted attention and fractured communities, making it harder for Bitcoin Cash to maintain a unified narrative. Despite this, Bitcoin Cash has persisted. It remains widely listed on exchanges. It continues to be used for payments in certain regions and communities. It still processes transactions cheaply and quickly. And it still has a market capitalization that places it firmly among established cryptocurrencies rather than forgotten relics. This persistence is important. In crypto, survival matters. Many projects with louder marketing, flashier technology, or bigger promises have disappeared entirely. Bitcoin Cash, for all its controversies, continues to function as designed. Understanding Bitcoin Cash also helps explain a broader truth about crypto markets. Technology alone does not determine success. Narrative, community cohesion, timing, and perception play enormous roles. Bitcoin Cash arguably solved a real problem, but it did so at a moment when the market was already shifting toward different priorities. Today, when we look at Bitcoin Cash's market cap and role, we're really looking at a snapshot of an unresolved debate. Should crypto prioritize being digital cash or digital gold? Should scaling happen on-chain or off-chain? Should simplicity trump maximal decentralization or vice versa? Bitcoin Cash is one possible answer to those questions. Not the only one, and not universally accepted, but a serious one. We are going to pause here for a quick word from our sponsors. Stay with us.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
To really understand Bitcoin Cash beyond the headlines and the history, it's worth slowing down and explaining how it actually works at a technical level, but in a way that doesn't require a computer science degree. The technology behind Bitcoin Cash isn't radically different from Bitcoin, and that's part of the point. Both networks use proof of work, both rely on miners to validate transactions and secure the blockchain, and both follow a transparent, fixed supply schedule that caps the total number of coins that will ever exist. Where Bitcoin Cash differs most clearly is in how it handles transaction capacity. By increasing the block size, Bitcoin Cash allows more transactions to be processed in each block. In simple terms, if each block is like a container, Bitcoin Cash uses a much bigger container than Bitcoin does. That means more transactions fit inside, which keeps fees lower and confirmations faster when demand increases. Supporters argue that this makes Bitcoin Cash far more usable for everyday payments. Sending funds is cheap, predictable, and quick, even during periods of higher activity. You don't need to worry about fees spiking or transactions getting stuck in a backlog. From a user experience perspective, Bitcoin Cash behaves much more like a traditional payment network, just without a central authority. The trade-off is decentralization. Larger blocks require more bandwidth and storage to process. That means running a full node can be more expensive over time, potentially reducing the number of individuals who choose to do so. Critics argue that this concentrates power in the hands of larger miners and infrastructure providers. Supporters counter that hardware and internet capacity improve over time, and that practical usability matters more than theoretical purity. This debate sits at the heart of Bitcoin Cash's identity. It's not trying to be everything. It's not positioning itself as a settlement layer for trillion-dollar institutions, or as a base for complex decentralized applications. Its focus is narrower: reliable peer-to-peer payments at low cost. Bitcoin Cash also introduced features aimed at improving usability, such as faster difficulty adjustments to maintain stable block times, and improvements to scripting that allow for basic, smart contract-like functionality. These features don't attract the same attention as large smart contract platforms, but they serve a specific purpose within Bitcoin Cash's design philosophy. When we look at Bitcoin Cash's market capitalization today, it tells an interesting story. While it's well below Bitcoin itself, it remains firmly in large cap territory. That reflects a combination of factors: long-term holders who still believe in the project's vision, ongoing usage in certain regions, and the simple fact that Bitcoin Cash is one of the most recognizable Bitcoin-related assets in existence. Liquidity is another important piece of the puzzle. Bitcoin Cash is widely listed on major exchanges and maintains consistent trading volume. That makes it accessible and tradable, which in turn helps sustain its market value. Many projects fade not because their technology fails, but because liquidity dries up. Bitcoin Cash has avoided that fate. Adoption-wise, Bitcoin Cash has seen real-world use, particularly in regions where low transaction fees matter more than speculative upside. Merchant adoption initiatives, grassroots communities, and payment integrations have all played a role, even if they haven't translated into explosive price appreciation. Again, this comes back to narrative. Bitcoin Cash positioned itself as money, not an investment vehicle, and markets tend to reward speculative narratives more aggressively than utilitarian ones. It's also important to acknowledge the internal challenges Bitcoin Cash has faced. The project experienced further splits after its creation, leading to confusion, fragmentation, and diluted community focus. Each split chipped away at confidence and made it harder to present a unified roadmap. In crypto, perception matters, and repeated internal conflict can be damaging, even if the underlying technology continues to work. Despite that, Bitcoin Cash continues to function exactly as designed. Blocks are produced, transactions are processed, and the network remains secure. That reliability is easy to overlook in a space obsessed with constant innovation, but it's not trivial. Many projects fail not because they lack ideas, but because they can't sustain long-term operation. Bitcoin Cash also offers an important lesson about how markets value crypto assets. Price is not a direct measure of technical merit. It's a reflection of demand, narrative, liquidity, and collective belief. Bitcoin Cash may solve a real problem, but the market's focus has shifted toward other use cases, such as store-of-value narratives, decentralized finance, and programmable blockchains. That doesn't make Bitcoin Cash irrelevant. It makes it specialized. In many ways, Bitcoin Cash exists as a counterfactual, a what-if scenario for Bitcoin itself. What if Bitcoin had chosen on-chain scaling instead of layered solutions? What if everyday payments had remained the primary focus? Bitcoin Cash is the living answer to those questions. For listeners, understanding Bitcoin Cash helps deepen understanding of crypto as a whole. It shows that decentralized systems don't just evolve through code, but through disagreement, compromise, and sometimes irreversible splits. It highlights that there is rarely one objectively correct path, only trade-offs and priorities. As the market moves forward, Bitcoin Cash is unlikely to dominate headlines the way newer projects do. But its continued existence, market cap, and usage remind us that crypto history doesn't disappear just because attention shifts. These early design decisions still echo through the market today. Bitcoin Cash isn't a relic, it's a reminder. A reminder of where crypto started, what it tried to solve, and how different visions can lead to entirely different outcomes, all built from the same original code. and that's why Bitcoin Cash still matters. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to make sure you are following the show and give it a 5-star rating, and as always, we will see you at the top.